and welcome to the Moriah Nightly News on this Wednesday evening. At the top of the broadcast, I do want to begin on a positive note and wish my father a very happy 63rd birthday. With that, from the nation, Moriah, here are tonight's top stories. Negotiations continue in Iran to bring the conflict to some semblance of an orderly and peaceful resolution, as if that were somehow achievable or an easy goal. Vice President Vance, of course, being the mediator there, the top negotiator for the U.S., whatever you want to call it. So far, it appears that the Iranians have objected to the International Atomic Energy Agency's regulators coming in to monitor or observe as they had in the past. Some pushback there. The divisions in Iran appear to be persisting or continuing. That divide between the hardliners and the moderate crowd. Usually the hardliners were those in the military, the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Hezbollah appears to be taking a more central role in this, that conflict in Lebanon with Israel being pushed in onto the table by the Iranians. The president warned of new strikes if Hezbollah kept it up, if they kept firing drones or what have you towards Israel. He threatened new strikes that seemed to be at Iran, directed towards Iran. And I would, again, as I had stated on Monday, be skeptical at this point as to whether the Iranians take that seriously, given the reports from the Associated Press, the Wall Street Journal, among others, that they appear to be emboldened by what they perceive as a victory to have outlasted the Americans in this war. A lot of politicking going on, so we will see how that develops. The Wall Street Journal noted the continued crackdown on protesters of the regime in basically human rights violations there. Notably was Nassar, I can't pronounce that, Bakarzada. He was a 26-year-old, more or less from what we could tell, from outside of the country, and was more or less just a businessman operating a phone store or some type of mobile phone business, and wanted to get back to it, but was arrested and put to death for being a supposed spy for Israel. I highlight that to show you what terrorism will do and why the only punishment for that and people like that would be for terrorism is to kill it and not negotiate it with it. In any case, the oil markets were opened up. The Iranian oil markets were opened to the U.S. to have U.S. buyers more or less buying Iranian oil. The first time that has happened since the 1990s. So that is an important development there. And the criticisms that we reported on Monday and earlier still remain. Again, I will leave that for now and let you draw the conclusions, and the rest of the archives are there as well. In the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer resigned after what was called a rebellion in his party, in his own party, the Labour Party, and getting a sense from a little bit of reading in the Wall Street Journal about the British politics and the situation there. The problem in Britain appears to be that the stronghold, or what had been the place of power or prominence for the two-party system, is faltering. I had to figure out what words I wanted to use there. But that is the two-party Labour and Conservative Party that has dominated British politics for the last century is starting to fracture and fall apart with the rise of other parties like the Reform Party that is trailing, that is, or outpacing the Labour Party in public opinion polls. Let me make sure I can, sorry, my notes are a little. The Reform Party is what was called an anti-immigration party, highlighting, of course, the immigration concerns that Britain has been dealing with over the last decade, and that has pushed it to the forefront in British politics. Factors like that has made it to where, here's my next note here, has made it to where the need for change has come. Factors like Brexit also cited, and a once-in-a-lifetime generational shift, it's on the same page, all highlighted as factors in the changes in British politics, the Ukrainian war, also being cited. To put it into perspective for you as to the somewhat tense and changing situation there, from the end of World War II to 2016, there were only 13 British prime ministers, and Britain prided itself on being a constant in political stability, is how it was phrased. This was again according to the Wall Street Journal, which provides the bulk of our source material for the national headlines, not all of it. We do jump around a little bit, but at least the backbone, the spine, if you will. And so 13 from the end of World War II to 2016, so you're talking a 70-year period there. And in the last 7 years, you have had 6 different British prime ministers, making that about one per year. And at that rate, they will very much outpace or far exceed that number within the next few years or in the next decade. So that again is the changing in the British politics, and I have not given the British and our cultural ancestors, or if you will, our cultural and spiritual heritage that we have shared with them, I have not given them their due on this program. That being said, we will continue to follow that development in the days and weeks ahead, but it is a significant one for the national global stage for foreign affairs. Our main story here tonight is to provide you with a little bit more context on the ever-growing debate over renewable energy here in our region. Of course, the battery energy storage units continues to be taking place in Ticonderoga and in many other Adirondack communities. Also, the concerns over solar projects and things like that. So tonight was to do some digging on, an attempt to do some digging on why that is. So I asked myself some questions. Privately, I've been asking myself why this push for renewable energy? Why is the power grid so bad? Or why is there an energy shortage here in New York in the first place? The answer, somewhat complex, in the sense that there are, of course, a couple different reasons for that, but not hidden, or not that it's not a straightforward answer. What it appears to be is that, broadly speaking, New York, aside from any aging systems which were cited, that in the push for renewable energy or climate friendly sources, the so called green source, and things like that, was a forced or a quick shutdown of traditional power sources, which would, traditional power plants, is how it was phrased, the older system. And that changeover basically happened when the infrastructure for the new was not in place. That would be the surface level explanation. Is That's the basic way that I understand it. But let me dig a little deeper here. So, according to an NBC News affiliate in Albany, this article came out of the Albany region. There was a report released recently from the New York Independent Systems Operator, um, indicating, of course, that right now that these factors include aging plants, extreme weather, and data centers. And I had been doing a little bit of reading on data centers, of course, to stay informed for future news stories. But I had not said anything here yet because I have not finished that reading yet. But Time Magazine had a feature article in a recent edition talking about how much power and energy a data center will use. And in one case that was not close to our area, but it was in Europe. They can, or in general, but they cited many cases in Europe in the article. They can take as much power as the entire nation of France combined. So that's the entire nation of France, and it looks like they use more power than that. That was from Time Magazine's feature article, and it is out on newsstands. For those of you in the area, it is actually at Walmart right now, if that's something you're interested in reading. It's interesting to note, this same article, that along with to solve this problem, so of the increased demand, the infrastructure problem, things like that, Hochul announced a plan, our glorious governor, to generate around 1 gigawatt of new nuclear power. And she wanted to put it in upstate New York. I guarantee you it will not be anywhere near Albany, because of the fact that academic studies, such as the one done by Stanford University, found that the smaller reactors that this new nuclear process uses is more prone to leaking than traditional nuclear reactors. It's new technology. That's the problem with most of what the research has indicated for the solar panels that we have mentioned here. The best project, it's new technology that is not ready to be deployed in mass like this. The Alliance for a Nuclear-Free New York has sent a letter to the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli, requesting a 2.5 year moratorium on new nuclear projects in New York State. The Alliance rep called it the most expensive form of energy, and citing not only the environmental uh, issues with it, but also the financial costs in building and maintaining it. So there is that side of it as well. That article from ABC News had noted, that ABC News affiliate noted that solar power, to be more specific there, right now is at about 29%, meeting about 29% of the entire state demand. Obviously, with costs there. One of them being the amount of land those things take up, among other things, as we've noted, and you can go back and watch the footage. Now, this debate is why the Republican candidate or GOP candidate, remember those are both the same political party. That's why Bruce Blakeman, the Republican candidate, wants to lift the hydrofracking ban in New York State, put in place as far back as 2008, as I could tell, but solidified under Andrew Cuomo, who I thought was on definitely in the same ballpark as Kathy Hochul, although she's proven to be far, far worse. The hydrofracking issue is, of course, being touted as as an alternative to the green energy. Many in the southern tier of New York State have been calling for it because it would not only it would bring them some economic benefits, and they have seen some of what they perceive as its successes right across the border in Pennsylvania down there. The Environmental Protection Agency has found that different parts of that process can damage the cycle. That's the water cycle. Remember, you have a watershed and with your in the ground, and that hydrofracking is basically shooting water into the ground to break up rock, sediment, and things like that to get the oil underneath and things like that. The EPA study didn't seem to have a concrete, specific example. That would be what we would call a case study in there. However, there were other reports from local news outlets downstate in Allegheny County and elsewhere, noting that in Pennsylvania, around at least 100 or so well water, water had to be tested because of the fracking, and there were issues down there. So whether that is the best solution for this problem, that I do not know, and I would be willing to bet that there's some debate over that as well. The problem is that, again, there very well may not be, or quite frankly, there is not, to put it bluntly and clearly for you, there is no real alternative to fossil fuels at this point in time. And the media and the Democrats, the left, and I hate to say it, put it in political terms like that, but those, or to put it this way, those who advocate for that have misled you. And we are seeing the fallout and the proof of that in real time and in practice right now. That being said, here in our region, yesterday was primary day for the New York 21st congressional race. Anthony Constantino mopped the floors with Robert Smullen by a landslide, at least 10 points over his opponent. And Blake Zenedine beat Stuart Emilio for the Democratic primary on the other side. That was the only item on the ballot for the primary here in New York State of interest, so that would confirm that there was no Republican primary for governor, and it looks like Bruce Blakeman is running unopposed there. Of note, Constantino called in his victory speech, called Genebian, we'll get it right eventually, a flop candidate who didn't know what political party he belonged to. In my reading, the claim does maybe have, I want to say that it has merit, because it's, of course, a politically charged rhetoric on the campaign trail. However, it is interesting to note, given the wording of policy issues or where going to be in stands on certain issues listed on his campaign's website. For example, when it comes to lowering costs, it is worded as that he is in favor of repealing unnecessary government regulations, supporting fair trade deals, bringing back American manufacturing, and strengthening supply chains. And we have heard that from the current occupant in the White House. Now, I don't say that to take a side on that particular statement, but just to say that it is out there and that there is certainly maybe a case to be made that it is either a moderate platform, a pump Democrat, if that were possible, or it seems like a contradiction in terms almost, or just say that maybe Constantino is right. Also of note in our region, and a bit behind on this because it is a little bit outside of our primary viewing and listening area. However, I did hear from someone locally that our viewers go as far north as Keene at this point, Keene, New York, Keene Valley in that area. So hello to everyone listening in Keene. With that being said, Lake Placid is being considered for the Olympic Games, or not that they're being considered, but there is a very strong push at this point for a potential bid for Lake Placid to host the 2038 or the 2042 Olympic Games, and they have formed that committee there to advocate for that bid. What it would look like, as other news outlets like the Press Republican and MyNBC5 have noted and reported on, is that because the Olympics have expanded since they were last here in 1980, they would have to use venues outside of Lake Placid itself. Of course, Lake Placid has been used as a training center for years, since 1980. Of course, 1980 was the site of the famous Miracle on Ice, or one of the turning points, at least culturally speaking, during the Cold War in that hockey game against the Soviet Union. It was not a gold medal match, interestingly enough, but it was still the most significant event of those games. So they would want to, in the games being proposed in the future, would consider that Plattsburgh or New York City combined with Lake Placid would host as more of a, I guess, a statewide tri-region type area. My only concern with that is precisely that New York City is on the list, and they do not need the economic or public benefit of hosting Olympic Games. I would think it would be far better served to see it go to a place like Albany, Buffalo, somewhere out that way, if the weather were to permit. Of course, with some of the changes in the weather we've had here, that would be somewhat unpredictable. However, with the cold weather we had this winter, that may not be a problem. here locally in our main region, or moving down to our main region, down in Ticonderoga, there is an additional board meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30. I did not write down that, so but that is from memory on that exact time, and I will post the exact time on in a Facebook post. That was that meeting that we thought was on Monday, and our team had some confusion on those details there, but it was Thursday, as I believe was the correct way. The calendar for events is on the Ticonderoga website, and we will work to uh, have some tighter dates on that. The challenge for finding some of those dates is that it is listed where you have to calculate mentally what the actual calendar date is. That if it's the third Thursday, for example, you have to say, okay, is that June? I don't know what it would have been last week for Mariah's, but was it June 25th or is it the 18th? And for some people, that can be a little bit challenging. So I am going to work to calculate the calendar date based on those types of phrasings and put that information out here in a way that is more succinct and easier to understand for the average layperson like me. In any event, on a more positive note, this weekend will be graduation weekend around the region with Moriah, Ticonderoga, Crown Point, all of our local schools, of course, Wilquette Valley. I'm not sure what Keene does for school these days, if they are in with Lake Placid or not. Actually, I do know that my niece is graduating from Lake Placid this coming weekend. So that being said, a congratulations to all of our graduates who are taking that next step and transitioning into the next part of life. And I will not say the real world because every phase of life is equally important. So, a big congratulations to all of our graduates here, and we wish you the best for whatever you decide to do in the future. And that is certainly a welcome piece of good news with everything that is going on around around town, not only town but community, all of the communities that we serve here at the Moriah Channel and the Moriah Nightly News through, I guess, through Eucalyptus Media, because that is the parent company. So that is the Moriah Nightly News for this Wednesday in the middle of the week, and we will see you back here on Friday to wrap up the week and report how that graduation went. Although footage is restricted, apparently, I found out in inquiring about that. But one day it won't be. So that is the Moriah Nightly News for this Wednesday evening. Good night.